Greetings, radiant particles. Today we have a message about truth in this now. We find it somewhat amusing that your definition of truth primarily is that which is not false, and the definition of falsehood is that which is not true. It does not really tell you very much, other than there are two natures of truth and falsehood. But it is a fundamental truth that you cannot know what a thing is unless you know what it is not. So, let us look at what truth is not. We ask you to imagine that you are standing in a cosmic court of law, and that you are the jury and the judge and the witness. And as witness you have just sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. What could you say? Do you know any truth? First, of course, you must discount all third-party hearsay evidence. That is, everything you have ever heard from anyone else, everything you have ever read, must be discounted. It cannot be a part of your evidence. The only evidence you can give is evidence you have validated yourself. We are working from the outside inwards now. So, your only evidence can be from your 3D life experience, if we're working from the outside inwards. And let us put that in perspective. Imagine a scale from 1 to 0. And on that scale, it represents at least the span of the universe. Or if your imaginations go further, you can imagine the total span of distance and space. Now investigate how much of that space you have experienced. Even the most travelled of you will have only seen a tiny portion of just this planet. So on your scale of 1 to 0, can you differentiate the amount of space you have validated from 0? Is it even visible on the scale? And let us look at time. Again, we draw a scale of 1 to 0. With 1 being the totality of all time. And how much of that time have you experienced? Can you differentiate it from 0? It is so small in comparison. So for a truth to be absolute and ultimate, it must span all space and all time. And you have seen very little of it. So you cannot validate from the outside any ultimate or absolute truth. You do not have the experience. And you can contemplate your electromagnetic spectrum, and you see of the whole spectrum some tiny, tiny portion as light. And the rest is invisible to you. So how much of the electromagnetic spectrum do you experience? How long would it take you to listen to all the wireless signals going over your wireless networks? If you just took 1 minute of the total spectrum. It would easily take hours to listen to all the radio stations, all your Wi-Fi communications, all your mobile phone conversations, even if you could access them. Your experience, in terms of the totality, is very, very tiny. And you have the impression that you have lived a life. And yet we ask you, if you were to write a calendar of every day of your life, and put a mark against each day that you actually, really and truly, specifically remembered, how many days of your life would you mark? And in each of those days, how many hours of each day do you remember? Take one memory, randomly from your life. What did you have for breakfast that day? How many mouthfuls did you have? How many times did you chew each mouthful? What underwear were you wearing? Most of your memories are insubstantial. They are partial. Even in a well-remembered thing, you often only remember one sense, something you have seen, something you have heard. But you may not remember the feel of your clothes against your body, the smell that was in the atmosphere. And yet you have the impression you have lived this life. So how true is that? Can you validate your past at all? Can you validate the future? Or can you only validate this now? And we look at your senses. Have they ever been mistaken? Have you ever remembered incorrectly or not remembered? So can you trust your memory? Have your eyes ever been fooled by an optical illusion? Have you seen things that were not there and not seen things that were there? So you cannot trust your senses. And you know that a scientist could put electrodes into your brain and create all sorts of experiences that were not real. So how real is your external experience? If you discount all your suppositions, your assumptions, your presumptions, your beliefs, your faiths, your trusts, well, none of them can be said to be entirely true. What is it left that you know? What is it you say can be true? And we understand that in terms of living your lives in the 3D realm, you must have these beliefs and assumptions and trusts. Or if you did not even trust that your chair would support your weight when you sat on it, life would become inconvenient. So life in the 3D world is not a good place to look for truth. So where can you look? inside to validate your own truth for yourself. For even we are third-party hearsay evidence, and only taking ownership of your own truth can you find it. And having discarded all your suppositions and assumptions and presumptions and beliefs, what are you left with? Nothing. Really, you know nothing. And yet, because you believe you know something, you do not even know nothing. For nothing is the ultimate truth, the void, the source of all. And until you can know nothing, you cannot say that you really know anything. Until you can look into the void and know how all reality springs from that void, can you validate any of your truths? For otherwise they are without foundation. The void does not have any determination. But to know what the void is, you must know what the void is not. And that is your job, O radiant particles, to experience what the void is not, so that you can know what it is. And when you look away from all that you think is real, then you find the void. Then you can know nothing. And when you know nothing, you really do know something. And by immersing yourself in that singularity of nothingness, and realizing that the nothing is one, and that out of that nothingness and oneness arises duality, and all else that you know. Only by going back to that root of absolute nothingness can you rebuild the reality in which you exist. Can you know its place, its relevance? For knowing is only in comparison. A thing can only be known when you know what it is not. And when you know what it is not and what it is, then you really know it. And when you really know the void and the one, you will know all that is in between. And that is the landscape of your great exploration, your great adventure. To define all the totality between the one and the void, so that you can define the limits of the one and the void. So the only, one only, absolute, ultimate truth is the void that is one. And in contemplating this you will find many other things. will blossom through you, will expand in your consciousness. For you cannot even truly say you are conscious unless you know what consciousness is, what it is that is being conscious. For ultimately that truth, too, is the void. So, great adventurers, explorers, we salute your courage, and we bid you love, joy and laughter. And greetings, radiant party.